Champaran Satyagraha. The Champaran Satyagraha of 1917 was the first Satyagraha movement to be organized by Mahatma Gandhi in colonial India and is considered a historically important rebellion in the subcontinent in the Indian freedom struggle. It was a farmers' protest rather than an uprising that had taken place in Champaran district of Bihar in India during the British colonial period. The farmers' protests were against the growing of indigo under British coercion with no reward for it. It was during this agitation that Mr. Gandhi was called Bapu, father, and Mahatma, great soul, by Sant Raut. Mr. Gandhi himself did not like being addressed as Mahatma, preferring to be called Bapu instead. Centenary celebrations of Champaran Satyagraha was conducted during 2017. A series of celebrations began on 10/4/2017 with a national enclave, Rashtriya Vimarsh, where eminent Gandhian thinkers, philosophers and scholars had participated. The event was organized by the Education Department and the Directorate Mass Education being the nodal office. On 13th May 2017, the Indian Postal Department had issued 3 commemorative postage stamps to mark the occasion. Mr. Narendra Modi, the PM, had on 10/4/18 attended the concluding session of the Champaran Satyagraha celebrations at Motihari in Champaran district of Bihar. PM Modi's key initiative included Swachh Bharat mission, attempt to interpret Mr. Mahatma Gandhi's spirit of cleanliness which he had ushered in several hundred years ago. Mr. Rajkumar Shukla, an indigo cultivator, had persuaded Mr. Gandhi to go to Champaran to take up and fight the cause of oppressed indigo growers. Till then, Gandhi was not even aware of Champaran or the plight of indigo growers. With his advent, Champaran Satyagraha was born. Champaran Satyagraha was the first popular Satyagraha movement. The Champaran Satyagraha gave direction to India's youth and freedom struggle, which was tottering and torn between moderates and advocates of militancy. Indian participation with the British system and the extremist elements from Bengal who had advocated violent means to oust the British from India. When Mr. Gandhi had returned to India from South Africa in 1915 and saw the plight of peasants of North India with his own eyes, he had decided to use the same methods that he had used successfully in South Africa. Lead protests with the entire participation of the common people. Under the British colonial laws, many tenant farmers were forced or coerced to grow indigo in some portion of their land. Already meager to the income was the result. This had even impoverished them even further. This indigo plant yielded a dye which was called Neil. The Germans had invented a cheaper artificial dye so that the demand for natural plant-based indigo dye was greatly reduced. Some tenants paid hefty monthly amounts to get exemption from growing indigo. These persons were naturally rich people, which the poorer farmers could not afford. During World War, German supply of artificial dye had dwindled and demand for natural dye had increased. The tenants were forced again to grow indigo plants in portion of their lands. This naturally caused resentment and anger among the peasants. Indigo Neil was being grown commercially and United Provinces, present-day UP and Bengal presidencies in the 1900s. Being a cash crop, it needed lot of water and depleted the soil of its nutrients. The local farmers had preferred rice and pulses which fulfilled their daily needs. The British colonies had forced the farmers to grow indigo plants by force, that is by coercion. The British government had coerced the poor farmers to grow indigo, making it mandatory to obtain loans through local satraps and landlords who were in collusion with the Raj. Several trading middlemen, including Jardine, Matheson, Pabanir, Sashan, Wadias, and others, had built great fortunes at the cost of the poor and deprived farmers. Several strong-arm methods were used to coerce the hapless farmers to grow indigo. Mr. Rajkumar Shukla and Sant Raut had pursued Gandhi to tour Champaran to have first-hand review of the situation. Thus had begun Champaran Satyagraha. Mr. Gandhi had arrived in Champaran on 10/4/1917 with a team of eminent lawyers. He was arrested on 16/4/1917 on the charge of creating unrest and was ordered to leave the province immediately. He was asked to pay a security of ₹100, but he had refused to pay and was arrested. Thousands of people had rallied and had protested Gandhi's arrest. The court had to ultimately relent and ordered Mr. Gandhi's release. The Champaran movement had concluded with the introduction of Champaran Agrarian Bill by W. Mad, member of Executive Council, Government of Bihar and Orissa. All the recommendations sought for by Gandhi had been conceded, and it was known as Champaran Agrarian Law 1918, Bihar and Orissa Act 1. This was the first time the non-violent satyagraha had left the Britishers perplexed, did not know to deal with satyagrahis who defied violent blows with non-violence, taking blows on head, lathis raining blows without even lifting hands, plainly ran out of ideas. This was the Raj which had crushed 1857 armed rebellion with iron hands. They did not know how to deal with satyagrahis led by Gandhi. Champaran Satyagraha was the first one of the several satyagrahas which were to take place later. This was a precursor to several of the satyagrahas which were to not only shake but also oust British rule from India later. One of the Gandhi's biographers, David Arnold, wrote that Gandhi had confused and angered and disliked the British in equal measure. Thus they were unsure whether he was in with them as a loyalist or a rebel. It was Gandhi's moral superiority that played a crucial role in the success of Satyagraha and Gandhi's final mission of India's independence. Mr. Gandhi wrote, the Tinkatya system, which had been in existence for about a century, was thus abolished, and with it the planters' Raj came to an end. The rats who had all along remained crushed now somewhat came to their own, and the superstition that the stain of indigo could never be washed out was exploded. So said Mahatma, and it was said in real spirit of the thing.